2, 3. Hello, welcome to episode number 4 of the 22nd Row, the podcast with Elton and Bernie, expert and the originator of the landmark first ever Elton John fan site and discussion group, the 22nd Row, Jim McKay. I'm Gary, the arena guy, joining in for what I'm sure will be a great discussion. And Jim, it is great to see you again.
Good to see you. It's been a while. I think it was last fall we last got together, and here we are.
No excuse for that.
Well, we had spent a lot of time with our plastic surgery and facial reconstruction, and
yeah, let's not admit that.
My new strap-on beard and things like that.
Yeah. So we got a lot of things we want to cover today. I think we're going to have a great discussion. And
sure.
Would you like to start?
Well, one thing is, I think you should start as our fellow co-Elton John expert here. I rely on things. A certain someone, that would be you, was part of the team that hosted Elton at where they work. So would you care to talk about that? Maybe,
yeah, actually,
maybe
it's
could
very
show you some of your new
fascinating
artwork and stuff.
to not only host Elton John and other great performers, but also to work kind of behind the scenes in some ways. So Elton John performed at the Schottenstein Center in Columbus, Ohio, at the University. I've met my old university at the Ohio State University. And it was the second stop on the Farewell Yellow Brick Road tour. Originally played in 2018, and it went so incredibly well that night. They planned a rare return visit to a city on the same tour. So that was planned for 2020, and then of course COVID hit. So all the dates for a whole year were tacked on to the end of some European dates, and so 2 years later we do it. Actually, fans kept their tickets for 717 days.
Wow.
From the previously scheduled show to April 12th. And so this time, I will tell you, it felt final. It was an amazing show. Hard to believe that just a couple of weeks before our date, Elton turned 75 years old. And he did change the set list a little bit. It was a good mix in 2018 and 2020. No spoilers here for those who have still yet to see it, but it was more up-tempo, which really showed Elton's stamina, in my opinion. It was one after another of great song, not necessarily hits, but mostly, and then some deeper cuts that we're always excited to hear. And it really was amazing. And we were told earlier in the day that if Elton's having a great time and the crowd is great, he will go about 2.5 hours. If he is feeling like the crowd isn't necessarily there, which I have a hard time imagining that happening, because the crowd was in the palm of his hands immediately, he might cut 2 songs. He did not do that.
Wow.
5 years old, 2.5 hours, basically nonstop. And so it was great. And so earlier in the day, we were told that Elton will arrive about 2:30 in the afternoon. And they compared him to a young, maybe a baby that takes a nap in the middle of the day. So
sure.
Elton will come, and he at about 2:30, he will almost immediately take a nap for about an hour, and does not like to be interrupted. Backstage should be quiet, because if you think a baby who is awakened from a nap is cranky, you don't want it to happen. So
I totally relate. I'm 100% with them.
I don't think that's
like
anything that unusual. So anyway, that was basically it. The previous time in 2018, they showed a photo of Elton to all of our security staff and said, "This gentleman will not be wearing the backstage pass, so do not kick him out."
Jeez, I'm sorry to hear people have to know what he looks like.
We laugh about that because, Elton is one of the most recognizable people in the world.
Sure, but
whether you're a fan of his music or not. However, there have been a couple of times in my career with maybe some lesser known artists who left the venue during the day and tried to come back, or not allowed back in the building, because not every security person is going to be the fan of everybody. So that was just kind of a little safety measure.
It is. I can understand. Yes.
I work a lot with the city of Columbus in my job. And so what I wanted to do is honorarily name the street in front of the Schottenstein Center, Yellow Brick Road. Seemed like a natural name. And so I worked on that for a few months and got that to happen in conjunction with the city of Columbus. So I've got a photo right here. I'll hold it up. It's got the Schottenstein Center in the background with the Elton image on the marquee. And then you see the Yellow Brick Road sign. And
Wow.
there. And so that was outside of the venue for about 10 days.
Wow.
Longer. It's in my office right now, the actual sign.
Great.
And if you want to see how big it is, it doesn't look that huge, but I've got a photo of me holding it. It is way bigger than you imagine. Go to the Arena Guy Facebook page and you can check it out.
Yeah, I would imagine it's about a yard, probably about a yard long at least, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge.
A meter for those of you in Europe.
A
There we are.
smaller version of it.
Well, bigger than that.
Elton logo on there.
Mhm.
And of course the yellow bricks and the Yellow Brick Road. This is a smaller version, which I gave Elton a copy. And on the back is nothing here because this is my copy. But on the back, I wrote his 51-year Columbus history on the back.
Oh, wow.
So he could have that as a reference during the show if he wanted to mention his first concert in
Wow,
1970.
very cool.
His Memorial Auditorium, for instance, in 71. And then through the years, this last show was his 12th concert in 51 years, ending up at the Schottenstein Center. He had played other venues as well. And actually, I talked to John Higgins, our friend John Higgins, who is a legacy consultant for Elton himself and the Elton John organization, and confirmed those dates and times. So Elton had a listing of that on the back of this sign. And one final thing on this to make it extra exciting was I do work a lot with the city and I work with the mayor's office a lot. And so I contacted the mayor's office and said, you know, this is really amazing. This is the last time Elton John, one of the biggest stars of any genre, of any decade, any century, will play Columbus, Ohio, at least as part of a tour. And we need to recognize his 51-year history and show appreciation. And so the mayor declared April 12th, 2022 as Sir Elton John Day. And I have a copy right here of the proclamation signed by the mayor, Mayor Ginther, and worked with him on that. And actually got an extra copy of that. So it was an actual. But April 12th, 2022 was Sir Elton John Day in Columbus, Ohio, to say thank you for 51 great years. And so there you go. It's a little summary of his time in Columbus.
Well, that's fantastic. I do have to point out there was another big event, another tribute that was paid by you to him, besides the Elton John Day, the street sign. I think a certain shoulder. Come on.
Oh my God. So just real quickly, because you know,
I'm making Gary do this. He doesn't want to, I think, but
we can talk for a week. So I'll just make it short. I was kind of as the arena guy. Seriously, follow the arena guy: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. And I do a lot of things. I've danced on stage with Salt and Peppa. I've done basketball tricks with the Globetrotters and tried to do contortionist type things with Cirque du Soleil, and I've been on stage with Garth Brooks trying to at least shoot a confetti gun, standing right next to one of the biggest stars in the world. And so a couple of my coworkers saying, where is the line that you will not cross? And I admit, I'm not the bravest guy in the world. Okay, so I'm a needle phobe. Even when you have a routine checkup and they draw blood, it just drives me crazy. I'm just a wuss, I admit it. And so they said, you know, you're the biggest Elton John fan I know. You need to get an Elton John tattoo. I said, well, there's needles involved. I can't do that. I mean, look at me. I don't look like a tattoo guy. And a lot of my friends have tattoos. So, you know, whatever you want to do, but it just wasn't me. So they said, plus, you know, do it in advance of the Elton show, help promote the show. I said, yeah. You want me to help promote a show that doesn't need promoting, because we were almost sold out.
Sure.
And so that was supposed to happen in 2020. It got postponed because of COVID. And then I was kind of thinking it may not, you know, rear its head again, and it did. And so actually on Elton's 75th birthday, on March 25th, I got a tattoo.
All right.
it's, I will tell you real quickly that when I walked in the tattoo shop with one of my coworkers who is kind of my handler, I said, he's with me for support. And they said, seriously, we thought you'd be in here to support him. You don't look like you get a tattoo. And apparently a couple of the people at the front desk bet the tattoo artist that I would tap out. But I did part of Yellow Brick Road.
Wow.
Here.
Wow.
And if anybody knows anything about tattoos, it took about 6 hours.
Wow.
And he did it in the off time because we videotaped the whole thing. And there's a 2-minute version on the Arena Guy Facebook.
Oh, good. I don't have 6 hours to watch.
But apparently what they normally do is they do the outline and then you come back 2 weeks later and you do the color.
I see.
Well, my handler said he doesn't know. He said you can, and I was going to be off work for about 2 weeks, personal stuff. So I was not able to do that, but he said he's going to be gone. And then the show's April 12th. We've got to do it all tonight. And
wow.
Afterwards, the tattoo artist said it was the most detailed first tattoo he ever did for anyone ever.
Wow.
And it's a 2-week process. So there you go.
Well, that is quite impressive, Gary. I don't know someone, you're a bigger fan than anyone I know. And as I've said, I've always wanted to have you on my team for Trivial Pursuit.
Likewise,
or Millionaire or something. But maybe it's too late, but maybe there's still time that they can work that photo in of that to the slideshows they have during the shows for.
Wouldn't that be funny?
It's a late entry.
So that's my story of Elton John in Columbus, his final time, at least as part of a tour. I think, they say he says he's not retiring. He still will record. He's
of course.
And maybe he'll come back for some one-off thing, or maybe he'll do a residency. We're all excited to find out what that future might hold. But that's the history in Columbus, and I was really proud to be a part of it. As we continue our conversation, the Lockdown Sessions continues to be one of my favorite albums. I've been listening to it a lot, and I don't really tire of it. And there's a couple of unique things as far as the vinyl versions of this that we should touch on.
Sure. Well, last fall, I don't know if it's because of the shortage of vinyl plants that was an issue last fall, but it was very hard to find a copy of it on vinyl. And I finally got my copy from somewhere in Europe, and it took about 3 or 4 weeks to arrive, and it did arrive. And then didn't see it. We had talked last time about there maybe being a blue vinyl version rumored. So to put the rumors to rest, there has been a blue vinyl version of it, as well as more pressings of the black vinyl, which are popping up in stores here, even in the States. So if you're still looking for a vinyl copy, you can find it. The prices are sort of comparable, about $50 for the double disc set that they were back we would have expected to pay last fall. So that's one thing to bring up, is that you can get this on vinyl pretty easily. And it's really great to listen to this, have the vinyl experience. And so,
well, as you know, I'm a record collector, and I've got probably about 13,000 albums in my collection.
Wow, didn't know that.
Everything from Jane Fonda's workout to Elton John. So everything
on vinyl. You have Jane Fonda on vinyl.
I do. So
okay.
Wow. The Lockdown Sessions. I kind of joke about the Lockdown Sessions being the best-selling album you can't find anywhere.
Right. We did talk
10.
about it.
I ordered it through eltonjohn.com. I think I maybe saw one copy in a store one time. So very interesting how records, CDs don't really sell much anymore, but how people are getting their music nowadays.
Sure.
And I think this was an example of an album that and that we really wanted, that was a little more difficult to find, but did really well on the charts.
Yeah. Well, it's if you want it, I think it's a little easier to find. There's blue vinyl, there's black vinyl. It's interesting, and maybe I mentioned this last time, or maybe it was in a conversation we've had, that a lot of people, not a lot, but a number of people who buy the vinyl editions buy it for the artwork. They actually don't own turntables. And when there was an article, I believe, in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, perhaps, and they're talking about how the albums get returned, not because the vinyl's defective, but because there's a scuff on the cover and things like that. And they're finding out that's even as much, if not more of a reason that these LPs get returned, which is kind of fascinating.
It really is. There are a lot of collectors out there, and as a collector of memorabilia and all that, there are some Elton John magazines, 3 different versions that I know of, that I posted pictures of, again, on the Arena Guy site. But of special edition magazines commemorating Elton's 75th birthday. And when I went up to the cash register, I said, do you mind if I put these in the bag? Because I did not want them to get scuffed or scraped or anything. One scrape would ruin it for me. I was like so nervous paying for these magazines. So I get that.
I appreciate that. My copy of the Union actually does have a scuff on it. I got it from Amazon. I looked everywhere for it. I couldn't get it when it came out 10, 11 years ago. And I'm glad to have it on vinyl, and I don't care about the cover as much. So, but I hear what you're saying. So it's out there if you want it. Blue, black. I'm more of a fan of the black, frankly. It's more practical to play. If you're collecting it for the visual, I guess the blue is nice, but it's really hard to put the needle down on, like, maybe like this upcoming thing we're going to talk about here, to find the tracks, so. But
talk about that.
Maybe we can move along to some of the new releases from associates of Elton. Is this a good time?
Well, before I forget, because I don't want to forget this. We talked about Friends last time.
Yes.
And just touch on, there's a comment you'd like to make about.
Thank you very much for reminding me. Yes, we had talked last time about how we did a discussion of Friends, the original motion picture soundtrack. And in doing research, I found on discographies.com, or Discogs as they go by, there apparently, so I thought, was a 2011 release of Friends on a standalone CD, not as part of Rare Masters, complete with the original album cover. The spine even had an artwork matched all the other classic years CDs. It had the island rainbow on the logo with the white print on the side. I actually had not seen it, but I read about it and I said I didn't even know it was out. Well, turns out it's a very high quality, well reproduced bootleg. So it's not an official, there never has been an official release of Friends as a standalone CD in the classic years series. So don't look for that. If somebody has a real good color laser printer is what it means, and a Photoshop.
Interesting. Okay, we'll get that cleared up. And you mentioned new releases by people.
Yes, there's,
and one of Elton fans' favorites is someone who is a big part of his history. Recorded for Rocket, #1 duet, and had a few hits on the record label. Kiki D has a new album out, which is very exciting.
Yes, it is. It's with her partner now, well over a decade, probably 2 decades. Kiki D and Carmelo Lugreri, and Kiki and Carmelo, they do this fantastic album. My personal opinion, I love the stuff that Kiki and Carmelo do more than anything she's ever done before. I really do, and it's really organic, great stuff. She's really found and really expresses herself. It's the real deal, and that's what I love about these albums. And I've only heard part of the new album. It's called The Long Ride Home, but I'm looking forward to it. And when I finish getting it, and hopefully we'll discuss it briefly in the future episode of the 22nd Row.
I'll check it out myself. I like some of the pared down arrangements that she's done in the past. There's an album called Naked, or Really Naked, or something, where she even Don't Go Break My Heart is a ballad, but it was very pure. And you could tell, like, this isn't somebody that's trying too hard to have a top 10 record right now. It sounds something that's just expressing their talent and showing their craft, and it's much more it just is really good. So I'm really looking forward to listening.
For me, a real pivotal album by both Kiki and Carmelo was The Walk of Faith, that came out about 15 years ago, and it really, just a really moving album, very spiritual as well as fun. So and
so another one of Elton fan favorites, and I will tell you, I found 3 in trying to find a few visuals for today. I found 3 albums and or CDs signed by this man, who's kindest, most generous, most talented persons involved in Elton history, and that's Davy Johnstone. And And I moved 3 years ago, and I'm still unpacking things. So I'm still finding things. So Mr. Johnston has recorded a new album with his family called Deeper Than My Roots. And what I've heard from it, I haven't heard the whole thing, really good.
I agree. It's really exciting. Glad it's one of the happy silver linings, I guess, if you want to call it that, from the pandemic. I mean, I don't want us to have more pandemics so we get more records, but great stuff.
Yeah, it's really good. And have you heard much from this album?
I've heard some of the outtakes. My copy actually is lost in the world of Amazon back orders. So we've been talking about just supply chain issues. Have you noticed a theme here?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I can't wait to hear
download it. If we get a full...
I found a solo CD that Davey did with I guess it's not solo if he did it with somebody, but a CD with John Jorgensen, which signed.
Yeah.
Then he did another CD with Steve Trudell. Did I pronounce that right?
I'm not sure myself. No, I'm not sure either. In Crop Circles, that was the one he did with John Jorgensen. Is that correct?
Yes, John Jorgensen. And then there's another one he did. I've got 3 copies signed.
Oh, wow.
Guys. And then I found my copy that I'd been looking for of Captain Fantastic, which was the first album I ever bought.
Wow.
Signed by, and this is a lead into the next album we'll talk about, Davey, Nigel, and Gus.
Oh, okay.
And so all 3 of them, missing on the photo inside are signatures from Ray Cooper and Sir Elton himself, but the other guys have signed it. And Gus Dudgeon has an album, Production Gems, which I know you're excited to talk about. You sent that to me, and it truly is a gem. And one of the real gems is all the information inside. And
absolutely.
Yeah,
a lot of people don't appreciate Gus, I think, because he's one of the guys behind the scenes. He doesn't get up on stage and perform, but he's behind so many records. And I got to make his acquaintance during thanks to the 22nd Row in the 1990s. My favorite story with Gus, not that I have a lot of them, was the first time I met him. It was at an East End Lights convention. I think it was 1998. And he said,
I was there too. So,
or maybe it was LA. I'm not LA, or maybe it was New Jersey in 2000.
I think it was New Jersey.
It was New Jersey. And
I don't know, because we were in LA together. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So he came over me. It's too funny. He came cutting through the crowds. I got to meet McKay.
Really?
Yeah. He just wanted to meet me. But in typical Gus fashion, and this isn't a real story, not one I'm making up. He said, "So pleased to meet you," or something to that effect. Get a spell check. Because, I have so many, I'm not a great typist, and I had so many spells. So, if I was making this up, I wouldn't be bringing that up as a detail. So get a spell check. And we had some great conversations about different things about the masters and so forth. And I think we'll go into some other time. He did seek input from the 22nd Row through myself about what should be bonus tracks on CDs, etc. And I traded emails with him literally about 6 hours before he passed away. We were talking about some things on the row. Yeah. And so it was on the evening before I was late afternoon where I'm at, and I ended up I got an email. We were going back and said we'd talk in a couple of days. But what a funny guy, and what dry sense of humor. And he's a good critic. I like that. I like good feedback, and I like hearing people offer good feedback. So I appreciate it. But he had so many great songs that we're so familiar with. I did not know when I knew these songs before I knew of Gus. We have the Zombies with She's Not There. We have he produced Eric Clapton and John Mayall for All Your Love. Obviously Space Oddity with David Bowie and Paul Buckmaster. 60 Years On and Rocket Man, of course, from Elton are featured on here, and as well as Whatever Gets You Tonight. So he's produced the Madison Square Garden show where John Lennon did his last appearance. He also produced that. So he has things from Kiki D, Ecstasy, and The Disappointed featured on there. And of course, Legs Larry Smith with Springtime for Hitler is on there, which is just fantastic. But that is all great. And I like the way it's called Production Gems. This actually was started to be put together, was actually Gus started working on this. People asked him to do this before he passed away. And of course, it was so sudden that it had to get picked up by other people, his associates such as Stuart Epps, etc. They worked on it. And what I just find beautiful is there's this huge booklet. It's 40 pages. It's a 40-page booklet. It's a production gem. So it's like a mini box. You have jewel box, and then you have production gems. I kind of like the tie on whether it was intentional or not. And you have comments, first notes on all the tracks. John Kaufman was the executive producer here. We have information about every single track. Then it gets even more interesting because it also features comments from all sorts of people. Everybody from Davey and Nigel and their opinions here. I had it all bookmarked here. We have Legs Larry Smith, Kiki D, Joan Armatrading, even John Reed has contributed to this. I think it's the first time I've had an Elton associated album that has John Reed on it in many, many years. So Rick Wakeman, yeah, so much stuff. And it just buy it for the book. And of course, it's great to have the CD as well. I mean, both of these things, I'd pay for both of these, as separate products. So
now you know me, I love the history of music and Elton and performers, and that kind of behind the scenes stuff is like a gold mine to me. And I love the CD, the booklet. I love even more for that information.
Yeah, both of those. They're just fantastic. So that's one thing. And we mentioned Stuart Epps, who was really a right-hand guy with Gus. We worked very closely with Gus for quite a long time. And Stuart Epps has a new book on audio out, and it's first installment's called The Early Years, referring to Elton John, and it's available on iTunes. Now, my first reaction is, we're getting 2 or 3 of these biographies a year now these days from people. And initially when I heard another one, but then it hit me. This guy was in the room when this stuff was happening. This is a word of mouth, writing down archival kind of thing, and it's really outstanding. I love, first, Liz Rosenthal's book is very comprehensive. I love that. Obviously, there's me, Elton John's memoir, which is a fantastic book for anyone to read who wants to learn the full story about Elton. But the thing with me is, if I were to have my druthers, Elton would have written a 26-volume encyclopedia for all the details I'd hope
like
for.
World Book.
Yeah, right. World Book or Encyclopedia Eltonography. Exactly. There's the thing that Dave Bodo has. But this is it's really fun. Stuart has this fantastic way of fantastic delivery. It's real breezy. He speaks rather quickly, and it's very dryly humorous, the whole thing. I don't think everyone would pick up on it, but you kind of have a sense that Stuart partially has his tongue in cheek the whole time with the amount of details, and it appeals exactly to the kind of detail I appreciate. Just for an example, he goes in and discusses Sails, the track off of Empty Sky, which has that fantastic solo by Caleb Quay. And so Caleb solos there, and I love that. And of course, he goes and talks about it, and he says it so succinctly, more than I am. I'm not the most succinct person. And it's interesting, it's funny, and make that connection. And by the time I got to the end, it's about 90 minutes, I think, long, this first section. I was like, oh, this is ending too soon. It ends something right around, was approaching a madman across the water, etc. And it's ending too soon. And at the end, he says, and I'll save the rest for the next chapter. And yeah. So I think it goes here in the States off of iTunes for about $10, and it is well worth it. And this is definitely a keeper. It's a verbal history, and I can't wait for more installments from Stuart Epps on this.
Awesome. That sounds great. I can't wait to hear it myself. And we're talking about the Elton John connection with the Gus and Stuart and Kiki D and others. And another connection that kind of popped up in the news recently was with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees being announced. Eurythmics made it, and probably overdue, but there's an Elton John connection here. I'll let you describe what that is, Erlan, and it will lead into some of the other artists maybe on Rocket Records in the past.
Absolutely. Well, what's very fascinating, of course, Eurythmics is a duo. consisting of Dave Stewart and of course Annie Lennox. And it occurred to me is that this, if I'm correct, if not one of the first, is the very first Rocket Records protege to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Dave Stewart originally was part of the original signings for Rocket Records back about 50 years ago with his band Long Dancer. And he was a teenager, about 17 years old, and he was in a band called Long Dancer with Kai Olsen, who's the guitar playing brother of Nigel Olsen, and others. And of course, Nigel saw the band play and immediately got him signed, helped get him signed to Rocket. And this was right just 50 years ago, around the time of Honky Chateau, Don't Shoot Me. So Dave Stewart from Eurythmics worked on this album with his band Long Dancer called If It Were So Simple. And he describes this very interesting in his memoir about how over the top and wonderful Rocket Records was. They for launching the record, If It Were So Simple, Rocket chartered his train, where on the train they already had the party going, this wild party. They get to their destination with a parade waiting for them, and then they go to the party launch venue. And as he puts it here, I'll quote this: everything at Rocket Records was over the top. Walking into Rocket Records was like walking into an expensive store, not a record label, where everybody had expensive watches and smelled of high quality cologne. So I can only imagine being 17 years old and being thrust into that kind of situation, or even 18. So that's kind of fun to hear that description. And, was more fascinating as Long Dancer, featuring Dave Stewart, opened for Elton on some of his UK dates in 1972. And even sang backup on Elton's shows for in Italy, like for a Rocket Man and Daniel. And part of this was, from what I read from Dave's memoir, is that Dave Stewart and Long Dancer really lacked discipline, and they were blowing a lot of the advance that Rocket had sent them on drugs and partying and so forth. So they thought they better put them to work to have some work ethic. So if you were lucky enough to see Elton John in Italy 50 years ago, you probably saw Dave Stewart of Eurythmics, future of you, perform with them. And I could go on and on. I once make you probably read that, but he talks about in his memoir about hanging with Davey D, Nigel, and Kiki D, who he especially loved and he called a real sweetheart. And but then, of course, just because of the problems I described, he was dropped by Rocket. And some other things that are interesting about Eurythmics, though, is that when Dave Stewart met Annie Lennox, she was a waitress at a vegan restaurant, but she was also moonlighting as an Elton John cover artist, performing Elton John songs, which is very fascinating to think of too. So Annie Lennox could probably play a lot of these classic Elton John songs, and she is a really great pianist. And so, they lost touch for a while. And of course, they went their own ways, and they formed a band called the Tourists. And then they came down just the two of them as Eurythmics. And when they started hitting it big with Sweet Dreams Are Made of This, and then the follow-up, Who's That Girl, Dave repaid the favor, reconnected with Kiki D. And if you watch the video for Who's That Girl, one of the girls is Kiki D. And so it's kind of a fun thing to see Kiki D there. And this is from this era of Kiki D. I don't know if you can see that very well on there or not, but that's what she was like at the time, and a little different, and the spiky hair era. And so at any rate, Elton has never appeared on a Eurythmics or one of Dave or Annie's solo albums, although Elton was very involved in Platinum Weird, which was this mockumentary Elton did, or that Dave did with Elton, Annie Lennox, Ringo Starr, Mick Jagger, and they talked about this fictional band called Platinum Weird from the 70s and how they had this precipitously high plateau and then fell out of a favor, and it was sort of like the Traveling Wilburys kind of follow-up, which of course Dave was involved in the Traveling Wilburys behind the scenes. But there are other connections between Eurythmics and Elton's albums, mainly with the people who worked together with them. And one is Ann Dudley, who arranged and conducted Annie Lennox's Medusa, her 1995 album, as well as Elton's The Big Picture. And then of course more notably was Patrick Seymour, Eurythmics keyboard player for Revenge and We Two Are One albums, also produced part of Kiki D's 1987 album Angel Eyes, which also featured Dave Stewart co-writing with Kiki D on the album. And so there is that connection. And most of all the players is Ole Romo, also known as Zach Partel, a Swedish drummer and programmer who programmed not only all the drums on 3 Eurythmics albums, which is quite an accomplishment, including Be Yourself Tonight, Savage, We Two Are One, but Ole also went on to work with Elton very significantly on The One. And you remember, on, as many of our hardcore fans know, The One had all programmed drums for the most part. All the drums on The One album were by Ole Romo. And so, and he even got a co-songwriting credit for Runaway Train with the duet, of course, with Eric Clapton. And Ole went on to work with Elton on the Lion King tracks, including Can You Feel the Love Tonight, Circle of Life, and I Just Can't Wait to Be King. You know, afterwards, he went to work with Shania Twain on Come On Over. And but there is that huge connection where he was the drummer for The One album. And I think that's fascinating. I could go on other things, but Elton and Dave remain good friends. Elton was at Dave's most recent wedding of his current wife. And most of all, though, Elton and Annie, and as well as with Dave, are very what I'd call super activists in finding cures for AIDS, especially concentrating their work in South Africa, which they all consider to be the country most affected by the AIDS crisis. And we know a lot about the Elton John AIDS Foundation, but Annie Lennox has a group called the Sing Campaign. And this is where the Elton John AIDS Foundation and the Sing Campaign are very involved in South Africa, because it's about women who are HIV positive and how they're affected, and they're not the opportunities for treatment and respect for these women. And so they're very involved in working together on that. And so it's really an interesting thing, but to consider. But at the base of this is that it's conceivably, if I'm correct, the very first rocket protege to be inducted into Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So, you know, Elton did have a good ear, and now we're seeing the fruits of that here half a century later. So
I think so
there you
too.
go.
I think Long Dancer's excesses were probably observed by the people running Rocket Records at the time as well.
Sure.
They did 2 albums for Rocket. You know, the one you mentioned, If It Was So Simple, and Thanks for a Good Life. And recently I read a review of If It Was So Simple that someone called it one of the best undiscovered albums of the 70s, and another called it a lost gem. So I think they were probably maybe a little ahead of their time at the time. You know, to have a hit single or hit album, it not only takes talent, but you need a break. And they've probably just didn't have that break. But what you and I have been talking about privately over the past, I don't know, month or so, with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nominations being announced, is, other than now Dave Stewart, has there been any Rocket Records artist who has made it into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Well, Neil Sedaka and Cliff Richard deserve to be in it, that's for sure. But I don't know that they are.
I will tell you that Cliff Richard is one of the most successful British solo male artists, if not the, in the history of pop music in England. And he deserves to be. He was kind of like an Elvis in England, and his success was phenomenal. Now, by the time he started having pop hits in the 70s with Rocket Records, that kind of impact was done, but he should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for that early impact. And the same with Neil Sedaka. You know, by the time he had impact with, and I do have a prop here, by the way, one of the gems in my collection, a gold record on Rocket Records for the album The Hungry Years, and this belonged to Bernie Taupin right here.
Wow, and Bernie's on the cover.
A record given to Bernie Taupin to commemorate the sales of 500,000 copies for Neil Sedaka's The Hungry Years on Rocket Records, as you can see on the label there. But Neil Sedaka should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for his impact as a songwriter at the Brill Building. Before he even had a solo hit, he was writing for other people. He had top rock hits of the day in the late 50s and 60s. And then by the time he hit the 70s, I don't know if his impact was that great. He had great success, but he should be in the. He's like
Absolutely.
that I cannot believe is not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, along with like, they're letting in Dolly Parton, who we all love. But we could do a whole show on who should be in, like George Michael or Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and people like that.
Yeah.
They're letting in people that aren't really rock and roll, but there's some obvious. That's a whole other topic.
Sure. Well, I think there's influences as an interesting topic to discuss, but it is a whole other topic. Who's an influence?
It is, yeah, and I think the impact of the day, because rock music in the 50s or 60s is different than it is now.
Sure.
But I will tell you that I don't think the Moyers on Rocket Records will be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Rocket record label. They are a I just wrote it, a Scottish Australian band who put out an album on Rocket. And of course, one of our favorites. And I don't mean to be silly here, but I've got 2 copies of this. I don't know why, but Jimmy's Chicken Shack.
Oh, yes. I remember that was a big deal when Made in England came out. That was, sort of the CD of the Protege to get at the time.
And
Protege Azure, I don't know.
An American alternative rock act. They had a single called Do Right in 1999 but not much on Rocket. And then I've got Ryan Down.
Oh, yes, Ryan Down, of course. I remember that was a big deal too.
He made he's an American rock singer, made his debut album on Rocket Records, and he actually opened for Iggy Pop and the Who in 1994 and 1997, I believe it was.
Yeah, well,
there are a whole bunch of artists. The list is long, but we're waiting for that one Rocket Records artist other than Dave Stewart to break into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Well, you reminded me, it's a little bit of trivia though, if I may just cut in here, is that
I think I know what it is.
You know what it is because you mentioned Iggy Pop, and that Elton tried to sign Iggy Pop early on when Rocket Records was starting up, and of course Iggy went elsewhere. But that would have been an interesting association. And of course, I think Iggy is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I believe he is, yes.
So Elton tried to get a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So he had artists. So he did have that ability to foresee who would be great. So,
but how cool that the Eurythmics made it. It was time for them to be in, and
absolutely
good for them.
Yeah.
Let's talk about another new release as far as Record Store Day goes, and that's the newest version of the Thom Bell Sessions.
Well,
a single,
yeah,
3-song single up here, apparently from Greece, but the writing on the label, I don't know if it's Greek, so I'm not sure if it's right.
Well, I just shuffled my notes here accidentally in the wrong place. Here we are. Thank you I do have notes. There's so many things. But before I'll explain why I have notes. You really do need notes to keep track of this. And it seems like it shouldn't be that big of a deal, right? And well, I remember you, as you are like me, you remember hearing about this in the fall of 1977, that Elton was working with the Spinners' Thom Bell, and he also worked with MSFB and
Stylistics, all kinds
and so many other people who were the Sound of Philadelphia and Sigma Sound of Philadelphia. And by this time, of course, he moved to Seattle. And the first I heard about this was in Rolling Stone magazine, of course. In Rolling Stone, they did a story about this, and they even talked about some of the working titles they had. Not just "Are You Ready for Love" was mentioned as one, I think, in there. They mentioned "Country Love Song." They mentioned "Nice and Slow" in that. And then I was expecting that, and the next thing I saw was "Ego." We heard "Ego" on the radio. What was that about? And what happened? What happened? And then "A Single Man" came out. And you stop hearing about this Thom Bell thing, and okay. And then the following summer, Roy Leonard, someone who's near and dear to your heart, I know,
yes.
A famous radio show host in Chicago, very much a friend of Elton John in terms of being a radio personality who loved Elton. One day I'm just listening, and he just says, "And here's a new one from Elton John," and it was "Mama Can't Buy You Love," and I had no idea it was coming. It caught me by surprise. Half an hour later, just by chance, I was over at this discount store called Venture, kind of like a Target. And there it was on an end cap, 12-inch, 7-inch, had no idea it was coming, bought one of each. And voila, all of a sudden we had this, it was after Single Man too had been out, of course. And so And of course, this was the version here. This was the vinyl. Here we go.
Yeah.
There we go. And so it was interesting. I noticed the change in Elton's voice. It was a little different for an Elton song. You didn't real. There's not Elton's piano playing, that's for sure. And it really, in certain ways, was a comeback because it really got Elton on the American charts, at least. We had not really been on the charts, and maybe you will discuss that. And
well, no, I mean, it's absolutely true. A Single Man, in my opinion, major disappointment, and it just did not keep the momentum. Of course, he had a break, of course, in there, but Part-Time Love didn't really, wasn't really a chart topper. And Thom Bell, 1977, they recorded this thing and asked Elton to sing in a lower register, which he had never done before. Yeah, that's the high notes and all that. And apparently Elton's love for R&B music, he wanted to make an R&B album. That didn't happen, but these songs came out, and the way he sang the song was just perfect. Thom Bell was a good influence on that. And but it was kind of like Victim of Love in the way that it was recorded so like 2 years prior to it coming out. It didn't come out till a couple years later, and like you, I was wondering, when is this coming out? And when it did come out, I was working at a radio station, and I remember the day it came in, and I asked the DJ to play it right away. Back in the days when they had a choice over what they played, and I was so excited. And Mama Can't Buy You Love came out and ended up going top 10, ended up at number 9 on the Billboard pop charts and number 1 on the adult contemporary charts. So it was. You're right. I believe it was a comeback because he really hadn't had a hit since what? Sorry seems to be on.
That was the last big U.S. hit, really, if you think about it. Yeah,
a big one. Ego lower rungs of the top 40, Part-Time Love in the 20s, but
plenty of songs that were worthy, in my opinion, of being bigger hits than they were, and that's a whole other discussion. But put them back up in the top 10. But that was great, and it was the song of that summer of '79, that's for sure. And so were the other 2 tracks that were released on it. Three-Way Love Affair and Are You Ready for Love? Okay, now we move along to years by the 21 at 33 and so forth. I learned something while doing some research. I didn't realize that the complete Thom Bell sessions, which eventually came out in 1989, were actually at one point, according to Liz Rosenthal's book, presented as being the final album due to MCA. Back in 1981, they were going to put it. Elton's management, John Reed, wanted to put out as the final album, and MCA said no. We want what eventually became Half the Fox as to be that album. So that was interesting. But I kind of written it off, and then when it came out with the CD of the complete Thom Bell session, I picked it up and I listened to it for quite a bit. And of course, I noticed that they had remixed some of it. They had changed some of it around, where the Are You Ready for Love had just one verse sung by Elton, and the other verse were sung by the Spinners instead, which was different from the LP, which was a bit of a change. I didn't listen to it a lot because, frankly, there was other new material at the time. We had so much other things coming out, like between Sleeping with the Past, later the box set. And occasionally when I listened to it, I stopped listening to the 12-inch vinyl version that I had from '79. And if I would listen to it, it'd probably be on that complete Thom Bell session CD. Didn't think much about it until it's the slow burn. 2003 comes around, and there's a whole new version that does so great, and it just keeps, it's for an album that never really quite came out. It really keeps giving and giving and giving, and I went through just to see what other versions and what mixes were out there, and I actually, that's why I have it written down. There's so many I can't keep up with them, and I'll pick some of my favorites. But and the one that probably caught a lot of attention was Ashley Beatles' version. For me, really caught some of the version. Maybe you have a different one that really grabs you, but that was
that was the one that returned him to #1 on the British charts.
Yes, and I like the version I heard, which was edited down to the certain riff and the refrain, and it was really, one thing about the original version, or the first 2 versions, there was tempo changes and things like that, which this really cut to the core of the dance groove there, and I really liked it. And I hadn't listened to that in a while, and I was surprised when it came out and became a hit. And at the time, it said there was one of the notes to one of the releases said this maybe really should have been the track that was released as the hit single, not Mama Can't Buy You Love. They actually said this in some Elton material. I don't know if I agree with that.
I don't know about that. I don't.
Yeah, but it was an outstanding track. But I discovered other versions that are out there as well. There is I didn't realize that the Spinners actually released their own version without Elton.
Yeah, I can talk about that when you're done.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and talk about it now, if you don't mind? Yeah.
Okay. Well, around 1980, maybe 79, I interviewed the Spinners.
Yeah.
One of these days, I could not find it now. I'm sorry. You know what? I moved 3 years ago and I'm still.
Sure.
But one of these times I'll play some of the audio. And I interviewed Nigel as well. And there was during a time when he was estranged from Elton. I might, but after the Central Park show. But Henry Fambrough with the Spinners was expressed extreme delight in working with Elton on that project, and extreme disappointment in how the original was mixed, because they felt like the Spinners were not very you couldn't really tell it was the Spinners, and they expected it to be almost more of a duet, if you can have a duet with a group and a solo artist. They expected a little more I don't know, a notoriety or credit for being on it. We as fans know that, but it's really not promoted like Dionne Warwick featuring the Spinners on Then Came You or something. It was, I think they were Elton John with the Spinners or something. So the original mix, they were not that happy with. To say they were unhappy, I don't know if that's accurate. They were disappointed that it wasn't what they thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
So Spinners released their own version, which did not do anything in the pop charts, but it hit number 25 on the R&B charts. And John Edwards, who was the lead singer of the Spinners, also put out a solo version. This is how much they believed in the song that they wanted to be a part of it. So John Edwards did his own solo version, and the Spinners did their version of the song, and they had an R&B hit with it. They were disappointed in the mixing, and they felt like the Thom Bell Sessions, whatever it was going to be called at the time, I think they called it Thom Bell Sessions because they didn't have an album title, and it ended up being the Thom Bell Sessions. But I think they thought it might be like the Union, Elton John, Leon Russell. It might be Elton and the Spinners, and it did not turn out that way. I will find that audio and I will play it for the first time in like 40 years on the 22nd Row podcast. He spoke very highly of Elton and the whole process. Just a little disappointed in how the Spinners were mixed in original recording. So I thought I'd share that.
Interesting. Well, I appreciate hearing that perspective. I have to say, I carefully listened to all these versions again, or at least the ones that Elton had released in recent years. And I read a comment again, perhaps I believe it was in Liz Rosenthal's book, where at the time, supposedly Elton said, I sing one verse on Are You Ready for Love? And that's it. And then the rest of it. And I hadn't read that comment yet. When I first listened to it, it's like, yeah, what is the deal with this? It's like one verse from Elton then becomes a Spinners track. That was my opinion of it.
I have to listen to it again.
Yeah, well, Elton does perform on the refrains, but to me, it sounds like, yeah, I get it. When I read the comment, yeah, I agree. It sounds like it's a Spinners album. And, in fact, I love the sound. It's great, but I'll listen to the version of Shine On Through that this done with the Spinners. And, it sounds like they're trying to force the lyrics onto stylistics. You make me feel brand new. I hear certain things here and there and lines and certain segments. It just sounds like I'm waiting for it to turn into You Make Me Feel Brand New when I'm listening to it,
Yeah. I think he was also talking about Mama Can't Buy You Love and Three-Way Love Affair, where they felt like the Spinners were not showcased as much as they thought they were. Are You Ready for Love might be a little bit different, but Mama Can't Buy You Love was the big hit at the time when we spoke.
Yeah.
And, he may have been focusing more on that particular track, but they were more like background singers on Mama Can't Buy You Love.
Well, it was interesting to hear him perform Mama Can't Buy You Love when he did the Elton and Ray tour in '79. That was kind of fun. It was so stripped down. That was kind of cool.
That was cool.
And it was really something to think of. And I I guess I see why they were aborted this sessions, why it wasn't finished. I get it, and I know they're very amicable about how it ended up. And I believe they even, Elton called and said, look, we finally had a hit. It took over 20 years, but here we are,
Yeah.
something of that vein. But there are other things. The Ashley Beadle remix, of course, is a great version. There's some other versions that are kind of vaguely by Metley Menk and Social Funk. And of course, there was the video that Katie Dawkins did, which took the original promotional video from 1979 and redid it around 2000. I believe it was around 2003, or maybe it was 2012. I'm a little mixed up on these. What was it? All these extra visuals and graphics. It was a super kind of a Peter Max kind of thing, but really it was a Katie Dawkins kind of video. If he had come out with that video in 1979, it would have been a #1 hit. I'm sure the videos were. It was just so visually appealing, and but one of the other cover versions that really caught my ear was by someone named Nancy Wallace in 2005. I don't know if you've ever heard this version.
I have not.
It is Nancy Wallace singing the song with just an acoustic guitar. Okay.
Interesting.
And what it reminded us is, not everyone's going to get this, but if you're a fan of Schitt's Creek, there's an episode where Patrick performs Simply the Best for David. And it's this whole stripped down version of Simply Best. And it's the same kind of vein. It's a totally stripped down version. It's out there on iTunes. And I just discovered it in the past 2 weeks. I did not know it existed even. And it's really intimate, moving, and it's a very nice, sweet love song instead,
Well, to check that out.
Yeah. So anyways, that's my take on it. Here's what we had in 1979 here in the US. There we go. Got it upright. And for those of you who got it, here it is. And my understanding is the content on this is the same as if you bought the MCA vinyl 1989, which I didn't even know existed, that they had a vinyl version, which is what you have, I believe. So.
I do, yes. It's interesting. Colored vinyl does nothing for me. I don't need to every color of every release. I guess the upside of that sort of thing is nowadays when they do the colored vinyl and it costs $25 to $35 for a copy.
Yeah.
The quality of the vinyl is better than what it used to be. So that generally is the case, and that is a plus. But I don't need purple, blue, yellow, clear, green, whatever, just to have it. I am a completist, as you all know. I would never turn it down. If I found it somewhere, I'd probably pick it up.
Right.
But it's not a new release to me.
Yeah. Well, it definitely, for me, it's new just simply because I didn't have it on an LP before, which I do.
Right.
And I'm not sure I would have sprung for whatever, but it is great to have. It's hard to find. I haven't seen it anywhere. It's a lot harder to find than Regimental Sergeant Zippo from a year ago. But anyways, I'm enjoying it, and it was fun to play again. I pulled out Single Man and Victim of Love as well from that period, So.
It is an interesting period where it wasn't the most successfully creative period. It's really, in my opinion, a real downtime, but there were a couple of gems. The Thom Bell sessions, Elton wanted to do an R&B album, and he gave up control. He didn't play any instruments. He just was going to be the vocalist. Thom Bell was going to basically be the boss. Told him to sing in a lower register, which he did. And I don't know if Elton liked that process or not. I think in the beginning he did. I don't know how it ended up, but he did return to the charts, at least to the top 10. Didn't really do much. In 2003, when it was re-released, Are You Ready for Love didn't do much in the US, although it was a #1 dance song for one of the dance charts. But it was Elton's 5th #1 in England, which is significant because he typically is known for having a greater success in America and elsewhere around the world than England. And it was top 10 in Australia, Belgium, Europe on the Euro charts, Scotland and Ireland, and a couple more. So internationally in 2003, to have a recording that was 30 years old roughly, to resurface, it's always exciting when something like that happens.
Absolutely. And especially when you consider the sessions were abandoned and they were left in the can for a year or two.
Yeah.
I wonder if the Spinners coming out with their solo version didn't give some impetus to the Elton's version being released. I don't know.
It could. I don't know.
Because it came out.
I mean, it was the solo version came out about the time of the Thom Bell session, so the original,
Yeah.
so I don't know, but it kind of showed their disappointment that they weren't featured as much as they thought.
Yeah.
Maybe if you listen closely, you can the Spinners, but as far as credit and all that sort of stuff, it wasn't what they were hoping for, especially with Bell, who had worked with them and some of the greatest R&B acts of the era.
Yeah. Well, another thing to consider too, and I think this might be a note to leave it on, is just let's remember Elton is the guy who had the hit with Philadelphia Freedom. So who would be more apropos to do this? I know some people said, well, David Bowie had Young Americans in his Plastic Soul album, which he also recorded. It was recorded at Sigma Sound. But if anyone has a claim to do an album like this, it's Elton.
No,
like
absolutely.
Freedom.
Plus, as much as he's talked about it from day one, about his influences being American music and Motown, and obviously Philadelphia Freedom and the Philadelphia sound, and just R&B music in general.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a natural that he did that. Should we mention one other thing before?
Please.
How are we doing time wise?
We have about another 10 minutes or so, if you want.
Okay, I understand we have some feedback from a listener, but
all right. Well,
I
yes,
want to first mention, should we say anything? And we'll do that to wrap it up. Should we say anything about Devil Wears Prada?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Devil Wears Prada. It's opening in 2 months from now.
I believe July 19th.
Correct.
In Chicago, which Chicago is like the pre-Broadway run for major shows. Aida did the same, and you and I are going to be there on opening night in Chicago to see Devil Wears Prada, the musical version of the classic movie, and Elton has written the music to it, and I'm excited about seeing it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. It's a nice surprise, and we knew this was coming before the pandemic, and I kind of forgot about it. And then they had full page ads for the tickets a few weeks ago, and it's like, oh, that's right, that's happening. Yeah. So during the run of that, it runs for about a month. Will also be Elton's final concert here in Chicago at Soldier Field, which will be a huge arena, not an arena, a stadium event. So that'll be very interesting too.
Yeah. I can't wait. I'm a big fan of Aida. That's one of his greatest works. The music for that show, and it'll be interesting to see what he comes up with Devil Loves Prada.
Well, John Jorgensen has commented on one of his social media channels that the songs are just fantastic.
Really,
he says he can't wait for people to finally hear these. So looking forward to it. So apparently he's had a hand in it, or he's heard it or something. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So that's July 19th in Chicago, opening night of Devil Wears Prada and their pre-Broadway run, and looking forward to that. One of the things that Jim and I like is when we do these podcasts is get feedback from people who listen. Do you agree with us? Do you disagree? Do you have comments? Do you have questions?
Right.
All of that is welcome. So we do have a viewer or a listener who has a question here, but how would you suggest, Jim, that if people do have a comment or a question, how do they reach us?
Right. If you'd like to submit a comment, send it to the 22nd Row Podcast at gmail.com, and I'll have the address located at the bottom. Okay. Right here. And so
okay, we encourage that. Please contribute, say you like it, maybe you'd like something different, maybe you have a question, maybe you don't like the color shirt I'm wearing, or maybe you want to hear more about certain topics. We will gladly do that and welcome that, and have been very appreciative of those who have taken the time to contact us along the way so far.
Well, that's true. Well, but we do have a question here. We have one question here from Steve Smith of Noblesville, Indiana.
All right.
And he asks us of our opinion about Diamonds. And it says, Diamonds is a 3 CD box set. Yes, we know that. And there you go. Thank you for having yours ready at the wait. And but it says that there's always something missing. If you had to change anything about Diamonds, which 2 or 3 tracks would you replace and with other tracks? And so that's the question.
That's tough. And he's talking about the 3 CD box set, not the 2-disc CD.
Right.
Just-
And it is hard. See, I have mine ready too.
I have both.
You're
Yes.
you got them all. You're just a completist.
Well, you don't know. I've got all my own stuff here in case the topic came up. I could grab something. So
You are prepared. You're armed.
I'm a visual guy.
Yeah.
So, what's interesting about this, Jim, is I do like this collection, and it's continues to be on the charts. I think this is the long, correct me if I'm wrong. John Higgins will probably call me later, but I believe this is the longest singular Elton John recording on the charts nonstop from release date to now.
I think you're right. Yeah, it is
And,
definitely up there.
this is a 3 CD, and every song on here was a single except for Skyline Pigeon. They include the piano version of Skyline Pigeon, which I love. My favorite version is the B-side of what is it on Don't Shoot Me, Daniel. I think it's Daniel. Yeah, that's my all-time favorite version, and never on an official album.
Yes.
But everything else is a single. So how do you decide when there are 17 times 3? So what's 51 tracks?
Well, I think the Panow thing, Good Morning to the Night, was a promotional disc only, if I'm not mistaken, as well.
It was a single throughout the world, maybe not in the US.
Okay, I was reading this differently here, but I thought it was just a promotional single only.
Well, we can talk about that off the air.
We'll look off the air. We'll flash it around later. That could be our next month's question, right?
Our next correction.
But yeah, enough. This is the question at hand here. Well, I thought about this, and I'm sure you did too. Do you want me to go first, or you want to go first?
Sure. And I have a feeling
Mm-hmm.
I'll agree on a couple.
Okay.
We're talking about 3, right?
We can do 3. There can be there's wiggle room. You know about me. You can rationalize all sorts of things. This is why we just don't have quick 3 lists.
And remember, we're doing this at the time of this release because there have been recordings since. Or
yes, well, that's where you're coming from. I'm coming from a different vantage of, as long as we're armchair quarterback, you do you and I'll do me.
Okay. Well, then I can do it. I can update too. No.
I only have one update. That's all.
Okay.
Go ahead. Drum roll. I don't have a drum here. So.
Oh, okay. Well, for me, I would take out Part-Time Love.
Okay.
It can be kind of a catchy thing, but I just listened to that and said that it's just not up to par with the that we got to love. And I feel like a single man who's downtime from a creative standpoint, although there are a couple songs on a single man that I like. I'd probably take that off. Taking off is harder than putting on. I believe Leave On belongs on. One of his, very first hits. The original Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, the George Michael version is on here, but the original, and you could argue that maybe both versions go on. You have Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me on disc 1, the original version, and George Michael on the 3rd version or CD maybe, so you break it up a little bit. There are a lot of songs that were big chart hits, or that were not big chart hits, but were chart hits bigger than songs on here. Is the last song on there?
No.
I would put the last song on here too, because I feel like that is one of the most perfect songs he's ever written. Emotionally, Bernie's lyrics, Elton's music to the marriage between the music to the lyrics is one of the most emotional songs by anybody ever. That belongs on there. And there's songs like that you could argue were bigger hits than like Kiss the Bride or whatever. Like Healing Hands was a #1 adult contemporary hit, 13 on the pop charts. Wrap Her Up, not one of his best songs maybe, but it was top 20. Who Wears These Shoes was 16. Club at the End of the Street. You Gotta Love Someone didn't really do it, didn't hit the top 40 in the pop charts, but it was #1 adult contemporary. So some of those songs, knowing what to cut, I would cut probably from, I kind of see what they're doing though. They're trying to cover all areas. So they Victim of Love to maybe show that, the complete evolution of the artist. But I would probably cut Victim of Love and Part-Time Love, and maybe even you know, I Looking Up didn't do anything, and Home Again didn't do anything, but you know, on the AC charts they did, but and Electricity, but I like them all so much. So I would cut Kiss the Bride, Victim of Love, and Part Time Love, and add the ones I mentioned: Leave On, Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, and whatever else I mentioned.
Well, you're very correct, and thank you for going first. I don't know if that we didn't discuss beforehand. Maybe you can club me over the head when we're done. But first of all, I think we both approach this from the same vantage, which is something great. Somebody with Blue Moves, when this question was Blue Moves, was by some accounts supposed to be a single LP, and then they added extra tracks, and then of course it was released as a single CD for a while with songs edited. A lot of debate which tracks should have been cut off of that, and everyone always lists these are my favorite songs on the album, end of story, which irritates me because there's one way of looking at it as a jazz fusion album, there's another one as an artist album versus being a top 40 kind of album, you know, and that always makes me crazy about Blue Moves because people just list what their favorite songs is without any right reason. But this is what songs you have to leave on here, not necessarily because of whether I like them or not, but because they tell the story in hits, you know, what are really diamonds. And well, first of all, I rationalized something here because I looked up the time on each CD and I discovered that if you faded out 2 or 3 songs with 4 or 5 seconds earlier, you could squeeze on the last song, because it's such a short song, into the CD. So you could shoehorn it, pry open its mouth and shove it in, you know? So there's that.
I mean, the last song needs to be on there because of Elton's work with his foundation as well. I mean,
it was a pivotal point. Exactly. So I said Victim of Love could go. I mean, if you want something dance music from that era, you have Mama Can't Buy You Love and Are You Ready for Love? That's the primo. The Victim of Love, no, you don't need that. You know, as much as I will listen. I'm also going to throw from there something about The Way You Look Tonight. Okay. Yes, it was #1, but we all know why it was #1, because it was attached to the Princess Diana single. And so
I like the unedited full guitar solo version. I really do. So
I'm not saying but I like it, but really it would not have been a hit if it was not attached. It would not have been done very well chart wise. That's my opinion. No way it would have been no way it would have been a top 10 Billboard 100 kind of list thing. So I would throw something about The Way You Look Tonight off there. Just a cheesy song. And so there was it. I also in fact, that's the one was my top choice for getting rid of, actually. So
really,
yes,
you've always said that. As long as I've known you since what 1990. Well, I've known you before that, but since it came out in 1997, you were not that happy about that.
I remember when you introduced it on the local radio station. At the time, we lived in the same town, and you were on a radio show, and you introduced it to the world on that radio station. I just like, this is like Tom Jones and Neil Diamond at their worst. You know, that's my opinion. And so I agree too. The thing about Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, the original version, of course, was hugely successful, but not as successful as the one with George Michael. But the thing is, the original version had, you know, pretty much the Beach Boys, and the Beach Boys was such a prominent, significant force in Elton's music. So this collection leaves you with Someone Saved My Life Tonight as being the primary example of the Beach Boys, which most people don't connect because it's such a sad song, and a relatively sad song.
And sad songs say so much, as we all know.
Right, exactly. So there was those things. I might cut the Panow song, you know, the remix. Maybe I love Ego, but I'm not sure it deserves to be on here, you know. And maybe I'd put Ego something to think about. But anyways, the songs I would include, besides the bonus of last song, is You Gotta Love Someone.
Yeah. Okay, good. I mentioned that. Good.
You Gotta Love Someone. There's a reason, is that it's an underground hit. I don't think many people know this. I think some people know I work in recovery, and I help people in voluntary ways. And it's a huge hit from people recovering from substance abuse and from other addictions. And none other than Melody Beattie, who was a pop culture person you may be familiar with. You heard this term codependency here in our culture. She invented that. And she features this in her lectures. Okay.
That's awesome.
And I go to talks for recovery, or I hear people talking about, and they have this song on their playlist, you know. Wow. And I know it came out at a time that's very dark for Elton's recovery, and perhaps why it's not mentioned there, but it's this underground song about recovery, you know, sort of like the way the last song was how, you know, he wanted to confront the AIDS crisis. This is a song, whether maybe he probably does know, but I mean, it is a song that I hear played in these sorts of contexts. So I definitely thought it's a fantastic song.
It connected with some people. It went number one.
It really did. I call it.
It was originally on the Days of Thunder soundtrack, and then it was put on To Be Continued. Never on a complete Elton album, except in those kind of compilation situations.
Exactly.
But I like this song, and I love the fact that just basically piano and a little bit of guitar. I could see James Taylor doing that song. You know.
Sure.
I love it. So yeah,
it should be really well covered. It could be. A couple other considerations I have. You could make a fourth disc, and in some ways I wish they would have, but You Gotta Love Someone was number one. Number two, Border Song would have been interesting to have, and it was not.
Border Song was on my list right here. B song right there. I want to show you right there. B song.
All I see is the word stop backwards.
I know this is scrap paper. I'm economically or environmentally conscious.
And here's another one that really piqued my curiosity is the first time I heard Live Like Horses was hearing it when it was just performed, him and his piano, 1994-95. And no version since then has really satisfied me. Every time I hear, the version that's on The Big Picture, the one with Pavarotti as well, which is what's featured on Spock Said, I don't care for it. I really think it's underachieving. I really like the intimacy that was just Elton and his piano when I first heard it, played live. And I guess it did very well in Europe, is what I'm reading here. But I listened to it.
Here, but there.
All I think of is just it's a little over the top. It's a little too Baroque for me.
Well, I think he did the Pavarotti charity concert, and there, and I think it's. I'm always a fan when an artist steps outside the boundaries to do something a little unique. He did a version of your song with another opera singer, which I really do like, but they don't match up to the originals, but still I don't blame them when they try something different like that.
Oh no, I don't blame them, but I just sort of put it on here. I mean, from the Pavarotti thing, like they have Talking to an Angel is with Eurythmics, they do it with Pavarotti. And of course it makes sense because they really have an opera singer in the original version too, even. But it just, I don't know, it's just too much. And that's my thing. So but my songs to include would have been that and then the other thing we talked about was whether we would have as of when the box came out as to today. And if it came out today, I would ditch Looking Up and replace it with Cold Heart. That's what I would do.
Yeah, I mean, if it came out today, Cold Heart would definitely have to be on there, top 10 and number one around the world. And also maybe because of the movie, I would have added I'm Gonna Love Me Again somewhere, just because it tells a story.
Of course, and he had won an Academy Award for it, so there's another one. But the fourth disc certainly would have been justified. Again, 26 discs would be even better. Like I also mentioned Leave On. You Can Make History Young Again was one I thought about. Who Wears These Shoes? Like I said, maybe Runaway Train, not my favorite. Two things that are just striking, and I'll close with this because I could keep going on. Tumbleweed Connection, I don't believe is represented on the box, nor is the Union.
No, but just realize that every song on here, of course, we can look up the Pinel thing, but except for Skyline Pigeon, these are singles. So Tumbleweed Connection, no singles. One of, I think, Elton fans' favorite albums, but unusual that there were no hit singles off that album. It was very artistic.
Well, according to this book here, that comes with it says,
am I wrong?
I don't know. Maybe it was elsewhere, but it says not released as a single in the UK and US, originally released in the Netherlands as a promo only single in June of 12.
Okay.
So obviously I didn't live in Europe at the time. Clearly a much bigger hit there than it was here, but it was a hit here. So there we go. So Gary, I want to thank you for being a very gracious host. And
thank you. I want to also thank Steve Smith for contributing the question, which was a fun conversation. It's always fun to give opinions on what would be added, what should be taken out, all that kind of stuff. But bottom line is, some of the worst Elton John songs are better than the best things from a lot of
absolutely.
It's just for the sake of conversation, and we're huge Elton fans. And Steve, thank you for the question. Anybody else has the question, contact us and we'll discuss it on a future podcast.
All right,
Jim, this has been awesome. I can't wait till next time already.
All right, well, thank you, Gary. It's good talking to you, and we'll next time. I have a feeling it'll just be a much shorter time. Until
I
next.
hope so. It needs to be.
All right. Have a great day. And thanks for
All right, you
everybody for
too.
listening. Bye-bye.
All right.
You can contact us at email via podcast@the22ndrow.com. podcast @the22ndrow.com. Thank you. On May 19th, 2022, 5 days after this podcast was recorded, Gary O'Brien unexpectedly passed away. Gary is greatly missed. There was no one else like him, the best of friends for everyone who knew him. This edition of the 22nd Row podcast was recorded May 14th, 2022. Copyright 2022 and 2023 James J. McKay. All rights reserved.